Why did the sergeant slam the rifle onto the concrete that morning? The sound cut through the Georgia air like metal grinding against stone, sharp enough to silence 30 recruits in an instant. Sweat stung their eyes, uniforms clung to their backs, and yet every ounce of discomfort faded in that single echo. The weapon lay on the ground like a broken truth. "Cooper," Sergeant Walter Daniels' voice roared across the firing line, more artillery barrage than human speech. His boots struck the gravel with deliberate force, each step echoing authority earned from 2 wars and 20 years of service. He was 6'3", built like a wall, the kind of man whose shadow could swallow smaller recruits whole. Sarah Cooper stood in that shadow. Barely 5'2", her frame was dwarfed by the oversized uniform that seemed to hang loose around her shoulders. 30 pairs of eyes shifted to her, hungry for drama, grateful it wasn't them. Her blonde hair, pinned back in a tight bun, caught the sunlight, but she said nothing. The silence stretched. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Daniels barked, "to correct my shooting stance?" Her lips parted. Her voice came soft, nearly drowned by the cicadas. "I was just trying to." "You don't get to think." His face loomed closer, crimson with fury, veins rising like cables beneath his skin. "You're a boot, a nobody, a waste of my time, understand?" Sarah didn't flinch. Not outwardly, but inside, the sting of 30 stares pressed against her like a vice. She wanted to disappear into the heat haze rippling off the range, to fade into anonymity, and yet she held her ground, silent. The recruits knew this game. Daniels picked someone each cycle, someone to break down in front of the others. It was a ritual as old as Fort Benning itself. Today, Sarah was the chosen sacrifice. Daniels turned, voice booming across the formation. "You all want to see a lesson, a real one. Watch closely. 10 minutes from now, you'll know what happens when rookies forget their place." A cruel grin stretched across his weathered face. But in 10 minutes, Walter Daniels would be frozen, staring through binoculars at something that shattered the order of his world. For now, though, the recruits shifted uncomfortably in the sweltering Georgia heat. It was August, 95 degrees, humidity high enough to choke. Even the toughest men had begun questioning their life choices weeks ago. This was hell's front porch, and Daniels was its gatekeeper. Sarah's eyes drifted past him to the line of rifles standing ready on the rack, a reminder of the test ahead, the final qualification. Fail, and the months of misery meant nothing. Pass, and they became soldiers. For 5 months, Sarah had blended in, nothing more than another face in the sea. Never first, never last. Her runs were average, her push-ups barely regulation, her scores on the range deliberately middling. She had buried herself in the camouflage of mediocrity. But camouflage only works until someone rips it away. Daniel stalked to the rack, distributing weapons with practiced efficiency. The polished M4 carbines gleamed in the sun, maintained with religious care, until he reached the back. He paused. His hand closed around the one rifle every recruit prayed they'd never touch. The reject. Its stock was split and duct-taped, sight bent a good 15 degrees left. Rust spotted the barrel like infection. The grip was worn smooth, black finish corroded to patchy gray. It was a rifle that didn't belong on any qualification line. "Special rifle," Daniel sneered, "for our special little soldier." A few recruits chuckled under their breath. Most looked away. Sarah stepped forward and accepted it without a word. And then something subtle shifted. Her hands moved with quiet precision, checking the chamber, running the charging handle, inspecting the bolt carrier. Where others would fumble, she moved like water, smooth and instinctive. 5 seconds. That's all it took. Maria Garcia, 2 spots down the line, caught it. Her eyes narrowed. But Daniels only smirked, satisfied he'd set up the morning's entertainment. "Cooper," he barked, "you're first. Show everyone how it's done." The recruits leaned forward in anticipation, pity mixed with morbid curiosity. Most of them couldn't have hit the broad side of a barn with that junk rifle. This would be a spectacle. Sarah stepped to the line. Her body lowered into the prone position with grace that seemed out of place in the dirt and heat. Elbows dug in, cheek welded to the stock. She aligned herself behind the weapon with the ease of 1,000 repetitions. It looked natural, too natural. 5 rounds slid into the magazine. Smooth, efficient, no wasted motion. The range hushed. Her eyes closed. A breath, slow, deliberate. When they opened again, the softness was gone. Her gaze carried something older, heavier. The kind of focus that doesn't come from training manuals but from years of staring through glass at a distant target. "Wall," she whispered. Her lips barely moved. The recruits frowned, confused. 3 to 5 from the west, gusting to 7. A wind call, knowledge no basic recruit should possess. Daniels laughed, harsh and mocking. "What is this call of duty? You've been watching video games, princess." The laughter rippled nervously across the line, but her expression never wavered. She adjusted the bent sight, finger on the trigger, time slowed. The first shot cracked across the range, sharper than the others they'd grown used to. By the time the echo faded, her second round was already chambered. 10 seconds, 5 breaths, 5 shots, each one spaced exactly 2 seconds apart as if she carried a metronome inside her chest. Then silence. The target hung downrange, impossible to read from this distance. Daniels raised binoculars, his knuckles whitening around them. The range officer leaned forward. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Target score all 5 rounds, same hole, dead center." A silence heavier than the heat fell over the line. 5 shots, 1 hole with a broken rifle. It was impossible, and yet there it was. Whispers erupted like breaking glass. Daniels lowered the binoculars, his face pale, eyes darting from the target to Sarah, then back. "Beginner's luck," he muttered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "Even a broken clock's right twice a day." He straightened, forcing authority back into his frame. "Qualification begins. Let's see how our princess handles that." One by one, the recruits stepped up. Jake Sullivan, the farm boy from Texas, went first. His hands trembled, his rhythm rushed. He passed, but barely. 75 points. Maria Garcia followed with steady hands. 82. Daniels gave her the rarest of acknowledgments, a nod. 2 failed outright, their targets riddled with scattered holes. The tension grew with each attempt. Finally, it was Sarah's turn. She rose, walked to the ammunition table, loaded her magazine. A scar peeked from beneath her sleeve when the fabric shifted. A perfect circle, radiating lines like a sunburst. The kind of mark only years of recoil could etch into flesh. Whispers buzzed in the ranks. From the distance, another figure appeared. Colonel Thomas Richardson, the base commander, a man who hadn't set foot on a qualification range in years. His eyes locked on Sarah. Daniel smirked. $50 says she doesn't break 50 points. He waited for takers. None came. Sarah lay prone again, calm and deliberate. The broken rifle nestled against her shoulder like it had been made for her. A breath, eyes closed. When they opened, the world narrowed to the target. "Wind call," she murmured again, barely audible. 3 to 5, gusting to 7. Daniel scoffed, but his laugh sounded hollow this time. Her fingers squeezed, crack, then another, then another. 10 rounds, 15 seconds, perfect rhythm, a symphony of precision. The range officer's voice trembled when he announced the score. 100 all rounds, same hole, dead center. The world froze. Even the cicadas stopped. The record, untouched for 20 years, had just been obliterated. Not by a legend, not by a special forces veteran, but by a quiet recruit who had never stood out, and with a rifle that should have been retired. Daniel's face darkened crimson. "That's impossible," she cheated. Nobody shoots like that, not on their first qual, not with that rifle. He turned to Sarah, trembling with rage. Who are you, Cooper? But before she could answer, a voice cut through the air. Sergeant Daniels, Private Cooper, my office now. It was Colonel Richardson. His tone left no room for argument. Sarah stood, cleared her weapon, adjusted the wrap on her wrist. For just a moment the compression sleeve slipped, revealing the emblem beneath. 5 interlocking rings, Olympic rings. Richardson's eyes caught it, and for the first time that day his composure broke. Why did the colonel call her into his office? Recruits rarely saw Colonel Richardson, much less heard their name from his lips. His presence on the range was like a thundercloud rolling over clear skies, and yet his tone carried no thunder, just cold authority. The walk to the administration building felt like a funeral march. Sergeant Daniels strutted at Sarah's side, boots hammering the pavement with unnecessary force, jaw set in arrogant certainty. To him, this was justice, proof that she had cheated, that his instincts about her being a fraud were correct. He was about to witness her humiliation, maybe even her discharge. Sarah, however, walked with quiet dignity, her eyes fixed forward, her pace steady. She seemed smaller than the sergeant beside her, but her bearing carried something older, heavier. Behind them, 30 recruits buzzed with speculation, their whispers barely restrained. Jake Sullivan watched from the formation, arms crossed, jaw tight. Maria Garcia stood at his side, eyes narrowed, thoughts racing. You saw that thing on her wrist, Maria whispered. Olympic rings. Jake's voice was low, careful. She's done this before, 1,000 times. That wasn't luck. The speculation trailed off as the trio disappeared into the command building. Inside, the air was cooler, but the tension pressed heavier than the Georgia heat outside. Colonel Richardson sat behind his massive oak desk, his posture straight as a bayonet. His office was no sterile workspace. It was a museum of war. Photographs lined the walls. A young lieutenant in Vietnam, a battalion commander in Desert Storm, a silver-haired colonel in Iraq. A glass case held an M14 rifle, the plaque beneath it nomming it as the weapon he'd carried in combat. His chest, decorated with decades of service, now rested in framed portraits, medals, and memories. This was a man who had seen lifetimes of war. Daniel stood at attention, chest puffed, jaw rigid. He radiated self-righteousness, convinced he was about to expose a fraud. Sarah stood beside him still, eyes fixed on a spot above the colonel's shoulder. She betrayed nothing. Richardson set down the file in his hand. His reading glasses slid to the desk. His eyes, clear and sharp despite his 62 years, moved from Daniels to Sarah. Sergeant Daniels, he said at last, voice calm, measured. You've accused Private Cooper of cheating, a serious allegation. Yes, sir, Daniels snapped. Nobody shoots like that on a first qualification, not with a broken rifle, not without high-level training, she. Enough. The word cut sharper than any shout. Richardson reached into the file and slid a photograph across the desk. Do you recognize this person, Sergeant? Daniels frowned. The photo showed a young woman on a competition range, rifle poised, wearing a stiff canvas jacket designed for stability. Her face, focused, unyielding, was unmistakable. Daniels blinked, looked from the photo to Sarah, then back. That's that Cooper. Richardson slid another paper forward, this one with an official Pentagon letterhead. Private Cooper, or should I say Miss Morrison, the colonel's gaze sharpened. Would you care to explain to your sergeant who you really are? Silence. Sarah's jaw tightened, her posture faltered for just a breath, a crack in the mask. My name is Sarah Cooper, sir, her voice steady but soft. That's who I am now. But that wasn't always your name, was it? Richardson's tone softened, almost fatherly, inviting honesty. Her shoulders dropped slightly, a long pause, then finally the truth. No, sir, I was born Sarah Morrison. Daniel's eyes widened. Recognition dawned like a punch to the gut. Morrison. Sarah Morrison. The name buzzed at the edges of his memory, a story he'd read years ago, headlines buried beneath combat reports. Richardson leaned back, voice adopting the cadence of a record being read. Sarah Morrison, three-time Olympic gold medalist in rifle shooting, 4 world records, 2 of which still stand, the youngest shooting champion in American history, and now Private Cooper of the United States Army. The words hit like artillery fire. Daniel's face drained from red to gray. His knees seemed to soften. The realization cut deep, months of berating, humiliating, and testing her. He had been tormenting one of the greatest shooters his country had ever produced. He had handed her a broken rifle as punishment, and she had answered by shattering a record that had stood for decades. But why? His voice was weak, stripped of arrogance. Why would an Olympic champion enlist as a recruit? Why hide who you are? Sarah's composure cracked again, just a flicker. Because being a champion doesn't mean. She stopped, swallowed hard, forced control back. I had my reasons, sir. Richardson's gaze lingered on her, shrewd, assessing. He had commanded thousands, but this was different. This was not just a soldier. This was a symbol. According to this file, he said, tapping the papers, you were selected for Project Silent Eagle, a classified program designed to integrate elite civilian marksmen into special operations. You were supposed to remain anonymous until graduation. Daniels flinched at the name. Silent Eagle. He had heard whispers, rumors of a black program recruiting world-class shooters, funneling them into units where precision meant life or death. He had never believed it was real. Now it was standing in front of him. Richardson's tone hardened. Your little stunt today compromised that program, Sergeant. Daniels staggered. His 20 years of pride, of authority, cracked beneath the weight of truth. Sarah adjusted the compression wrap on her wrist. The Olympic rings glinted beneath. Years of strain, of injury, of endless repetition had been hidden in that fabric. Daniel's voice came small, stripped bare. Sir, I didn't know. I thought she was just another weak recruit. Then you haven't learned much in your 20 years, Richardson said sharply. The most dangerous soldiers are often the ones who don't broadcast their abilities. The room fell silent. Sarah's hands trembled just slightly, not from fear, from the effort of holding herself together. She had built this new identity brick by brick, and now it was crumbling around her. Richardson turned his gaze on her. Private Cooper, why didn't you report your status when you arrived? Silent Eagle participants were ordered to check in. Her chin lifted, her voice steady. I wanted to earn my place, sir. Being a champion doesn't make me a soldier. If I couldn't make it through training like everyone else, then I didn't deserve to be here. Richardson's brow furrowed. You hold 3 Olympic gold medals. You've represented this nation at the highest level. What more could you need to prove? For the first time, her composure broke completely. Her voice cracked, raw. Those medals don't mean anything when you hit the ground in a grocery store because a car backfired and your body thinks it's under attack. They don't mean anything when you wake up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat because you dreamed about missing a shot. Her breathing quickened, words tumbling faster, heavier. They don't erase the fact that for 22 years, all I was Sarah Morrison, the girl who never misses. But what happens when that's all you are? When you realize you've never been anything else? The confession hung heavy in the room. Even Daniels, battle-hardened, cruel in his training, felt it. The weight of expectation, the crushing silence after applause fades. He recognized it, and it shook him. Richardson flipped another page in the file. Police reports, newspaper clippings. It says here you disappeared for 6 months after the Olympics. Your family reported you missing. The media speculated endlessly. Sarah's eyes fell to the floor, her voice quiet. I needed to find out who I was without a rifle in my hands. Turns out I wasn't much, so I decided to become something more. something that mattered beyond points on a scoreboard. "And you thought the Army would give you that?" Richardson asked softly. "No judgment, just curiosity." "I thought serving my country differently might help me find purpose beyond medals." She straightened her shoulders. The soldier reasserted itself over the vulnerable girl. "I'm not sorry for hiding who I was. I'm sorry it caused complications for the program." Richardson studied her a long moment, then turned to Daniels. "Sergeant, gather the unit. We have some damage control to do." Daniels blinked. "Sir, half the base saw her shoot. By tonight, rumors will fly." "Better to control the story now." Richardson's tone left no doubt. He turned back to Sarah, eyes softening. "Private Cooper, remain here. We'll discuss your future shortly." Daniels saluted stiffly. No swagger, no bark, just a man whose pride had been shattered, dismissed to face the recruits he'd misled. The door closed behind him, leaving Sarah alone with the colonel. For the first time, Richardson's tone softened fully. "Sit down, Sarah." The formality dropped. He gestured gently to the chair across from his desk. "Let's talk honestly about why you're really here. Why was the entire unit standing in formation under the afternoon sun? It wasn't graduation day. It wasn't inspection. It was something else." The recruits shifted in nervous silence, sweat dripping into their collars. They had been ordered into the assembly area within minutes of Richardson's command. Whispers buzzed under the heat haze. None of them knew why the colonel himself had appeared on the range that morning. None of them knew why Cooper, quiet, unremarkable Cooper, had been marched off beside Sergeant Daniels like a prisoner. And yet every one of them felt it. Something had shifted. Jake Sullivan's eyes scanned the empty podium. His hands clenched at his sides. He remembered the scar on Sarah's shoulder, the rings on her wrist. He remembered her breathing, calm, measured, predator's breathing, as she pulled the trigger. Maria Garcia stood beside him, lips barely moving as she whispered, "She's not just some farm kid who got lucky with a rifle." Jake nodded, his voice low. "No, she's something else, and we're about to find out what." The sound of boots cut the speculation short. Colonel Richardson emerged from the administration building, silver hair shining under the brutal sun. His uniform was immaculate, ribbons lining his chest like a living history book. Behind him, Sergeant Daniels followed, but the swagger that usually radiated from him was gone. His face was pale, his jaw tight. The colonel mounted the podium. Daniels took position off to the side, standing stiff, his eyes fixed forward. "Recruits," Richardson began, his voice carrying effortlessly across the grounds. "This morning you witnessed something extraordinary." A murmur ran through the formation. Private Cooper achieved a perfect score on her rifle qualification. A score of 100, 10 rounds, same hole, dead center, with a rifle that should have been scrapped years ago. Whispers swelled, then died when the colonel raised his hand. "What you don't know," Richardson continued, his voice heavy with deliberation, "is that Private Cooper has been serving under an assumed name as part of a classified recruitment program." The air seemed to hold its breath. "Her real name is Sarah Morrison." The silence cracked, gasps rippled through the formation. Eyes widened, Jake's mouth fell open. Maria grabbed his sleeve, her voice a whisper edged with awe. "Holy shit." From somewhere in the back, another recruit muttered it aloud. The words seemed to ripple forward like shockwaves. Richardson let the silence stretch, then spoke again. "For those of you who don't follow competitive shooting, Sarah Morrison is one of the most decorated marksmen in American history. 3 Olympic gold medals, 4 world records. She has represented our nation on the world stage." As if on cue, the large outdoor screen behind him flickered to life. Footage from Tokyo filled the display. Sarah on the line, her competition rifle braced in the stiff jacket, her breathing calm, her trigger squeeze invisible. Shot after shot landed with machine-like precision. The recruits stared, transfixed. The same girl who had jogged beside them in the mud, who had struggled with radio calls, who had kept her head down during drills. There she was on the world stage, standing on a podium with the flag rising behind her, gold medal around her neck. The disconnect was jarring. Richardson's voice cut through the stunned silence. The question you're asking is why? Why would an Olympic champion enlist as a basic recruit? Why endure the same hardships, the same insults, the same anonymity, when she could have walked into any unit in the army and been welcomed with open arms? His eyes swept across the formation. The answer is simple, because true warriors do not seek shortcuts. They prove themselves every day in every test, no matter how demeaning or difficult. At that moment, Sarah appeared. She stepped from the side entrance of the building, not in fatigues but in her dress uniform. The difference was subtle but undeniable. The timid recruit seemed gone. She carried herself with quiet authority, her posture perfect, her steps measured. Her ribbons were minimal, still just a private, but on her they seemed to carry the weight of something larger. She marched to the front, stopped before the colonel and saluted sharply. "Private Morrison, reporting as ordered, sir." Richardson returned the salute. "Private Morrison, do you wish to address your fellow recruits?" She turned to face the formation. For a moment she said nothing. Her gaze swept across the faces she had trained beside, sweated beside, stumbled beside. They were no longer strangers, they were comrades. Finally she spoke. "I owe you all an apology, not for hiding who I was, but for not trusting you with the truth." Her voice carried, clear but soft. "Each of you has fought through your own battles here. You've faced demons, doubts, failures, and you've done it openly. I chose to do it under a mask." Her eyes found Jake, Maria, a few others. "Sullivan, thank you for your kindness when I couldn't finish PT, Rodriguez, for sharing your MREs. Johnson, for helping me with radios. None of you knew who I was, but you treated me like I mattered anyway. That's what real soldiers do." The formation was silent, listening. Sergeant Daniels was right about one thing. She turned her head slightly, eyes meeting the towering figure to her left. "Being able to shoot doesn't make you a soldier. These past months have taught me more about courage, about sacrifice, than 20 years of competitions ever did. And I learned it from all of you." Her words were quiet, but they carried weight, the weight of honesty. Richardson stepped forward, reclaiming the podium. "Private Morrison will complete training with you. She will be evaluated by the same standards. She will be held to the same requirements. Afterward, she will join the Army Marksmanship Unit before transitioning to Special Operations." He paused. A faint smile tugged his lips. "Though I doubt meeting standards will be a problem." A ripple of uneasy laughter passed through the formation. Respect mixed with disbelief, and for the first time that day, the tension lightened. But then Richardson's tone hardened again. "Let this be a lesson. Never underestimate the person beside you. The soldier next to you might be an Olympic champion or a poet or simply someone with more courage than you realize. Judge them by their actions, by their heart, nothing else." His gaze slid to Daniels. "Sergeant, do you have anything to add?" The recruits tensed. Daniels had been silent the entire time, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. Now he stepped forward. For 20 years he had been the immovable wall of basic training, the man whose word was law. And yet now he seemed smaller. "Recruits," he began, voice gravelly but steady. "I've trained thousands of soldiers. In that time I've prided myself on being tough, on pushing recruits to their limits. I believed I was fair, but I was wrong." His eyes flicked to Sarah. "I judged Private Cooper by her size, by her silence, by my own assumptions, and I disrespected her. For that, I owe her an apology." The recruit's jaws nearly hit the ground, the sergeant apologizing. Sarah's expression softened. She spoke quietly, but everyone heard. "Sergeant, you were doing your job, pushing us. I never took it personally." "You should have," Daniel said, his voice cracked with something rare, humility. "There's a difference between tough and cruel, and today you taught me that." The silence that followed was not awkward, it was reverent. Daniels turned back to the recruits. "Let this be a lesson for you too. Every soldier has a story. Every soldier has a past. Never mistake quietness for weakness." He looked at Sarah again, his voice low, almost grudgingly admiring. "That rifle I gave you hasn't been maintained in years. Most trained snipers couldn't hit the broad side of a barn with it. You put 10 rounds through the same hole. That's not skill. That's artistry." For the first time, Sarah's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. "The rifle wasn't broken, Sergeant," she said softly. "It just needed someone to understand its quirks. Every weapon has a personality. You just have to listen to what it's telling you." Daniels nodded slowly, as if storing the words away. The colonel cleared his throat. "Recruits dismissed. Regular training resumes at 600. The formation broke, buzzing with whispers with awe. But Sarah remained where she stood, recruits drifting toward her, some shaking her hand, some just staring, some whispering about medals and legends. Maria approached first, her usual sharpness replaced by open awe. "My little sister has your poster on her wall. She wants to shoot because of you." Sarah's smile turned genuine. "Tell her the real competition isn't on the range. It's here, learning to matter in a way medals never could." Jake joined, his brow furrowed. "But why give it all up? The fame, the sponsorships, the easy life." Sarah met his eyes. "Because medals don't make you bulletproof, and fame doesn't give your life meaning." She looked past him to the fatting sun. "I was Sarah Morrison, the girl who never missed. Here, I'm learning to be something more." The words lingered, soft but unshakable. And somewhere inside the crowd, Sergeant Daniels stood in silence, hearing them, realizing that sometimes the best lessons aren't the ones he taught, but the ones he was forced to learn. Why did training suddenly feel heavier after the truth came out? The days themselves hadn't changed. Same grueling wake-ups at 500, same endless marches through the Georgia humidity, same taste of metal in their mouths after a run. But for Sarah, everything felt different. Every eye followed her now. Every mistake, every hesitation, every stumble, magnified under the weight of a name she'd once tried to bury. Morrison. It wasn't a name anymore. It was a shadow. Her bunkmates tried to pretend nothing had changed, but the air was thick with unspoken questions. At night, when the barracks quieted, she felt them watching. She could almost hear the whispers when she turned away. Olympic champion, golden girl, perfect aim. But beneath it was something else, harder to bear: expectation. Jake Sullivan was the first to break the silence one evening. They sat outside after chow, boots off, letting the fatting sun wash over blistered feet. "You ever think," he began cautiously, "that maybe you set the bar too high?" She glanced at him, brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, picking at a frayed seam in his trousers. "You shoot better than any of us could in 1,000 lifetimes. Doesn't matter how much we train, we'll never catch you. So now, every time we're on the range, I feel like I'm not even trying for first, just second place." She studied him, saw the honesty in his eyes, the frustration he hadn't voiced until now. "Jake," she said softly, "second place isn't failure. Neither is missing the target sometimes. You know what failure is? When you stop trying because you think the fight's already lost." He looked at her, surprised at the gentleness in her tone. She paused, then added, "You think I was born shooting like this? You didn't see me at 12 years old, crying because my father made me stay on the range until midnight, missing the same target again and again. You didn't see me fail, trip, break down. You only saw the medals, but the medals are the smallest part of the story." Jake's expression softened. The words landed heavier than she intended. Because in truth, they weren't just for him, they were for her. She needed to remind herself too. But not everyone was so willing to listen. Maria Garcia had been distant since the reveal. Once quick to joke with Sarah, to share stories during Firewatch, now she kept her distance, her eyes hard, her words clipped. One afternoon, during combatives, it boiled over. The recruits circled on the mats as pairs sparred. Sweat glistened on skin, the smell of rubber mats and adrenaline thick in the air. When Sarah stepped forward, Maria immediately volunteered to face her. The drill sergeant barked, "Fight." Maria came fast, aggressive, sharper than Sarah had ever seen. She landed a shove that sent Sarah stumbling back. Another recruit whistled under his breath. Sarah reset, palms up, non-confrontational. "Maria, this isn't." Maria lunged again, fists tight, her voice low and furious. "You lied to us, all of us, and you expect us to just clap for you now." Sarah absorbed the blow, redirected her momentum, brought Maria to the mat with controlled precision. The drill sergeant blew the whistle, satisfied with the takedown. But Sarah didn't let go immediately. She leaned close, her whisper sharp. "I didn't lie to hurt you. I lied to survive." Maria froze beneath her, their eyes locked. And for the first time, Maria saw something that rattled her: anger, fear. Not fear of losing the fight, fear of being seen. When Sarah finally released her, Maria stayed on the mat a moment longer than necessary. That night Maria didn't speak to her, but the silence wasn't as sharp. Meanwhile, Sergeant Daniels watched it all. Since the revelation, he'd been a different man. His bark still echoed across the training grounds, his orders still came sharp as ever, but the cruelty had faded. He no longer singled Sarah out. In fact, he avoided her eyes altogether, as though ashamed of what he'd done before he knew who she was. But shame alone was what kept him awake at night. It was recognition. For years he had built his authority on toughness, on breaking recruits until they either crumbled or hardened. He believed fear forged strength. But Sarah had shown him something different: resilience in silence, strength without bravado. He saw himself in her. Or rather, he saw the soldier he wished he had been. Late one evening, long after lights out, Daniels found himself outside the barracks, cigarette glowing between his fingers. He hadn't smoked in years. The night was quiet, cicadas humming in the trees. The door creaked behind him. Sarah stepped out, heading for the latrine. She froze when she saw him, her posture tightening instinctively. He exhaled smoke into the darkness. "Relax, Private. I'm not here to chew you out." She hesitated, then nodded, continuing past him. But his voice stopped her. "You know, you embarrassed me in front of my recruits." Her jaw tightened. She turned slightly. "That wasn't my intention, Sergeant." He flicked ash into the dirt, his voice quieter now. "Maybe it needed to happen. Maybe I needed to remember what respect looks like." She studied him. The words didn't sound like the Daniels she knew. They sounded human. "You've trained thousands," she said carefully. "You've made soldiers out of kids who couldn't even lace their boots. That's not nothing." He gave a dry chuckle. "And how many of them hate me for it?" Her silence was answer enough. Daniels sighed, grinding the cigarette out under his boot. "You know, Cooper, Morrison, whatever you want to be called, I don't know what the hell to do with you. You're not like the rest of them. Hell, you're not like me. And maybe that scares me." She tilted her head. "Why?" "Because if soldiers like you exist," he said, "then maybe the way I've been doing this job all these years was wrong." The confession hung between them, raw and uncomfortable. Sarah didn't answer immediately. She thought of all the times he had torn into her, humiliated her in front of the unit, broken her down until she nearly lost herself. And now here he was, stripped of armor, asking silently for something he didn't have the words for. "Forgiveness." Finally she said softly, "It wasn't wrong, Sergeant, just incomplete." He looked at her, startled. "You pushed us," she continued. "You made us tougher, but toughness isn't everything. You don't have to choose between being feared and being respected. You can be both if you want to be. Daniels swallowed hard. For once he had no reply. Sarah left him there, staring into the dark, cigarette smoke still clinging to the night air. The weeks rolled on, training intensified. The rucksacks got heavier, the runs longer, the drills harder, but the atmosphere had shifted. The recruits no longer treated Sarah like a stranger. They asked her advice on breathing techniques, on handling recoil, on staying calm under pressure. She helped them quietly, without arrogance, never flaunting her skill. For the first time in years, she began to feel like part of something bigger than herself. Not a competitor, not a champion, just a soldier among soldiers. But at night, when the barracks dimmed and sleep crept over the others, Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Because there was still something she hadn't told them. Not Richardson, not Daniels, not even herself fully. The real reason she had enlisted. The real failure that haunted her. It wasn't about medals, it wasn't about purpose. It was about a shot she had once taken, a shot she couldn't erase. And though no one else knew it yet, that secret was coming for her. Why did her hands shake the first time she touched the sniper rifle? The weapon was familiar, too familiar. The long barrel, the weight that settled into her bones, the glass eye of the scope staring back at her like an old enemy. It was the designated marksman drill. For weeks, the recruits had been training with their M4s, but today the range officers rolled out something different. The M110 semi-automatic sniper system. Not for every recruit, just those who had shown potential with long-distance accuracy. Which meant Sarah, of course. Daniels called her name without hesitation. The unit turned to watch her walk to the line, whispers trailing behind like shadows. She felt the weight of their eyes more than the weight of the rifle. "Don't make her shoot," Maria muttered under her breath, arms crossed. "She'll just embarrass the rest of us again." But Jake shook his head, his tone low, uneasy. "No, watch her hands, she doesn't want this." And he was right. Because when Sarah lowered herself behind the rifle, something in her changed. Not the calm focus they had seen with the broken M4, not the composed Olympic champion. Her breathing faltered, her jaw tightened. Sweat beaded on her brow, though the morning air was still cool. She shouldered the weapon, the scope's crosshairs slid into view, and in that instant, she wasn't at Fort Benning anymore. The air was different, thinner. The smell wasn't cut grass and Georgia heat, it was dust, powder, burning rubber. She was on a rooftop, Kabul. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears as she watched the street below. Crowds moved through the marketplace, women clutching children, men shouting prices, the chaos of a city alive with color. Her spotter's voice buzzed in her ear. "Target 300 meters, balcony left side, male, AK across his chest." She found him. The scope brought him close, too close. A young man, barely 20, cradling the rifle like it was a child. His lips moved, speaking to someone inside. "Wind call," she whispered. "Steady, 3 miles per hour left to right." Her finger rested on the trigger. The man shifted, turned. His eyes, dark, frightened, met hers through the glass. And then in his arms she saw it. Not a weapon, not a threat. A child. The world slowed, her chest tightened. She whispered, "Wait, he's not." But her finger twitched. The crack split the air. The boy's body jerked, the child fell. And Sarah Morrison, Olympic champion, perfect shot, world's best marksman, had made the shot she could never take back. The memory hit her like a physical blow. Back on the range, her hands trembled. Her breathing came ragged. The Georgia sunlight blurred as her vision swam. "Private Cooper," Daniels barked. "What's the holdup? Take the shot." But she couldn't. Her finger froze on the trigger. Her chest locked, her throat burned. Through the scope the target blurred, not a paper silhouette anymore, a child's face, wide eyes, tiny hands clutching a toy. Her hands dropped. She rolled off the rifle, gasping. The recruits erupted in murmurs. Maria smirked. Guess the champion's human after all. But Jake stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Shut up, Maria, can't you see something's wrong?" Daniels crouched beside Sarah, his usual bark softened to something strange, almost human. "Cooper, breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Steady." She obeyed without thinking. Years of conditioning. The panic slowed just enough for her vision to clear, but the damage was done. She had cracked. Later in the colonel's office, Richardson leaned forward, concern etched across his lined face. "It's not the first time, is it?" Sarah shook her head, eyes down. "No, sir." "Tell me." Her voice trembled, a whisper forced through clenched teeth. "Kabul. I was there as a civilian contractor. They asked me to assist, just one shot, one target. I told them I wasn't a soldier. They said it didn't matter, that I was the best shot they had." Her hands balled into fists. "I pulled the trigger, and I killed the wrong person, a boy, 12 years old." The silence that followed was suffocating. Richardson's expression hardened, but not with judgment, with sorrow. He leaned back, exhaled slowly. "And you thought joining the army would erase that?" "No," she swallowed hard. "I thought it might balance it. I thought if I served, if I carried the weight honestly, maybe I could make something out of what I destroyed." Richardson's voice softened. "Sarah, war is built on mistakes. No soldier leaves without ghosts. You just met yours earlier than most." But she shook her head violently. "This isn't like missing a shot in training. This isn't like losing a friend in combat. This was me, my finger, my failure." The colonel didn't argue. He let the silence linger, then said, "The only way to balance a burden like that isn't to erase it, it's to carry it, and to choose every day what you'll do with the weight." His words sank deep, not comforting, not absolution, but real. That night back in the barracks, Sarah lay awake again. She stared at the ceiling, the whispers of the recruits around her fading into sleep. Jake's snores, Maria's restless turning, the rhythm of boots against the hallway floor. Her mind drifted, unbidden, back to the rooftop, the boy's eyes, the silence after the shot. But something new joined the memory, the colonel's voice. "Choose every day what you'll do with the weight." The words didn't erase the image. They never would. But for the first time she wondered if maybe, just maybe, the weight didn't have to crush her. Maybe it could shape her. Still, the path ahead was darker than ever, because the army wasn't just testing her body anymore. Now, it was testing her soul. Why did the forest feel so much heavier at night? It wasn't just the weight of the rucksack cutting into her shoulders, or the damp Georgia air clinging to her skin. It was the silence. The kind of silence that presses in from all sides, broken only by the crunch of boots through leaves and the occasional whisper of wind. The recruits had been deployed into the woods for their first extended field training exercise. 3 days, 2 nights, no comforts, no safety net. They would march, set up perimeter defenses, conduct simulated raids, survive on rations and water filtered from streams. It wasn't combat, not really, but it was the closest most of them had ever come. Sarah felt the tension in the unit as much as the humidity. Since her collapse on the sniper rifle, the others had been watching her differently. Respect was still there, but it was mixed now with uncertainty, even fear. If the perfect shot could crack, what did that mean for the rest of them? Jake Sullivan kept close to her flank, steady as ever. He didn't ask questions, didn't push, just walked beside her like an anchor. Maria Garcia, on the other hand, barely glanced her way. Her silence wasn't sharp like before, it was wary. Daniels marched at the head of the column, barking occasional commands but with less venom than usual. He seemed distracted, his eyes flicking back to Sarah more often than he wanted to admit. By the time the sun sank below the trees, the recruits had covered 12 miles. They set up camp in a clearing, establishing security, digging shallow fighting positions, posting watch rotations. The air smelled of pine and sweat, of damp earth and the faint metallic tang of MRE heaters. Sarah moved methodically, setting her gear, checking her sector. Her hands worked with practiced precision, but her mind wasn't in the forest. It was on that rooftop, on the boy's face. Every rustle of leaves seemed to whisper his name. Every silhouette in the dark seemed to carry his shadow. When Daniels called her name, she snapped back to the present. "Cooper," he said, voice low but firm. "Your team lead for the patrol tomorrow. You'll take Garcia, Sullivan, and 2 others. You've got Point." The words landed like a weight. Point, the one responsible for the patrol's success or failure. She opened her mouth to protest, to say she wasn't ready, but the look in Daniel's eyes stopped her. It wasn't cruelty. It was challenge and something else. A test, yes, but maybe also a kind of trust. "Yes, Sergeant," she said quietly. The night dragged on. She barely slept, her body resting but her mind restless. At 400, Jake nudged her awake. "Your turn on watch," he murmured. She sat in the dirt, rifle across her knees, scanning the tree line as the others slept. The forest seemed endless, shadows stretching in every direction. And yet, for the first time in weeks, she felt something stir inside her. Not peace exactly, but clarity. The weight wasn't leaving. The ghost wasn't going away, but maybe she could move anyway. At dawn, the patrol began. 5 recruits, single file, weaving through dense brush. Sarah on point, eyes scanning, ears tuned to every sound. Jake followed 2 steps behind. Maria brought up the middle. The exercise scenario was simple. Locate an enemy camp, played by Kadri, report coordinates, and extract without being detected. But in the woods, nothing was simple. Every snapping twig could betray them. Every shaft of sunlight through the canopy seemed to spotlight their position. 2 miles in, Sarah raised her fist. The patrol froze. She crouched, scanning ahead. A tripwire glinted faintly across the path. Not real explosives, blanks probably, but it would have signaled their failure. She motioned them around it, careful, deliberate. The others followed. Maria's whisper brushed her ear. "Good eyes." It wasn't praise exactly, but it wasn't scorn either. It felt like a truce. An hour later, they reached a ridge overlooking a clearing. The enemy camp lay below, 4 cadre in mock uniforms, tents set up, a fake radio tower in the center. Sarah signaled halt. They dropped low, crawling to the edge. Through her scope, Sarah studied the camp. Her hands trembled again, but not from Kabul this time. From the knowledge that every decision she made now would affect the 4 people behind her. She forced herself to breathe, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Jake's whisper came low, steady. "We trust you, Sarah." Her chest tightened. She scribbled coordinates, passed them back. Maria radioed them in. Then quietly they began their extraction. It should have ended there, mission accomplished. But halfway back, the forest erupted with shouts. "Contact," cadre voices bellowed. Paint rounds cracked through the trees, snapping branches. The recruits scattered, diving for cover. Sarah's heart slammed. This was the ambush they'd been warned about. "Get down," she shouted, her voice sharp, commanding. Jake fired suppression rounds. Maria dragged one of the younger recruits into cover. The air filled with the chaos of simulated combat, shouts, gunfire, the pounding of boots through brush. Sarah's scope found a silhouette cadre bounding between trees. She froze. The glass brought him close, too close. For a heartbeat, it wasn't a cadre anymore. It was Kabul, the boy, the child. Her finger hesitated. Then another shot cracked from her left. Jake's paint round hit the cadre square in the chest. He went down, raising his hands in mock surrender. Jake glanced at her, reading the hesitation in her eyes. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The fight dragged on. Slowly, methodically, the recruits worked together, bounding, covering, maneuvering. Under Sarah's shouted orders, they pulled back, broke contact, and regrouped. When the final whistle blew, the forest fell silent again. Paint smeared their uniforms. Their chests heaved with exertion, but they were still standing. Back at camp, Daniels debriefed them. His eyes lingered on Sarah longer than the others. "You froze," he said bluntly. She didn't deny it. "Yes, Sergeant. But then you moved, you led, you brought them back alive." His voice softened, almost grudgingly respectful. "Not bad, Cooper, not bad at all." The recruits glanced at each other, surprised. Daniels wasn't a man known for compliments. Sarah met his gaze steady. For once, she didn't shrink under it. That night, around the dim glow of red-lensed flashlights, Maria finally broke her silence. "You hesitated," she said flatly. Sarah nodded. "I did." Maria studied her. "Why?" The words sat heavy on Sarah's tongue, but she didn't run from them. "Because I've made the wrong shot before, and I live with it every day." The group fell silent. The forest seemed to lean in, listening. Jake finally spoke, his voice steady. "Then maybe that's why you're the one we trust most, because you know what it costs." Maria's expression shifted. Not pity, not disdain, something closer to understanding. For the first time, Sarah felt the distance between them begin to close. She lay awake again that night, the boy's face still there but quieter now. Less like a wound, more like a scar. And scars, she realized, don't disappear, but they can harden into something stronger. Why did the night begin with fire? Not real fire, but the crack of blanks, the roar of smoke grenades, the thunder of simulated mortars rattling the windows of the training village. The recruits were jolted awake by sirens, scrambling from cots in the makeshift barracks. Boots hit dirt, rifles snatched up, helmets strapped on with fumbling hands. It was their culminating exercise, a 48-hour mock combat operation. Every lesson, every drill, every sleepless night had been leading to this, and now the test was here. Sarah bolted into formation with the others, her heart pounding. The village around them, plywood buildings, narrow alleys, abandoned cars, looked like a war zone in miniature. Smoke curled into the humid night. Loudspeakers blasted pre-recorded cries in foreign languages, adding to the chaos. Daniel's voice cut through the din. "Listen up, this isn't a drill, this is your final. You've got civilians in the AO, hostiles in every corner and chaos all around. Fail here and you don't graduate. Cooper," his eyes locked on her, "your squad lead." The words hit like a round to the chest. Every head turned toward her, some surprised, some doubtful, some relieved. Sarah's throat went dry. Squad lead. All decisions, all failures would land squarely on her. She glanced at Daniels, searching for cruelty in his eyes, but there was none, only a steady challenge, the look of a man placing trust he didn't know he still had. "Yes, Sergeant," she answered, voice steady. The mission brief came fast. Clear 3 sectors, secure the mock embassy at the center of the village, evacuate hostages. No real bullets, but the pain of paint rounds and the sting of failure would be real enough. They moved out. The squad flowed through the alleys, rifles raised, every shadow a potential threat. Sarah's voice carried low but firm, issuing hand signals, directing fire teams. She felt the weight of the helmet pressing down, the ghosts pressing harder. At the first sector, contact came fast. Opposing force cadre opened up from rooftops, paint rounds splattering brick. Recruits dove for cover, returning fire. "Garcia left flank," Sarah shouted. On it, Maria bounded forward, aggressive, precise. "Jake with me," she barked, leading a push through the alley. Her heart raced, but her mind sharpened. She called wind, angles, distances without thinking. The language of battle was the same as the range, only louder, faster, messier. They cleared the sector, 1 down, 2 to go. But with each block, the resistance grew heavier. Cadre played their roles well, shouting in foreign tongues, dragging civilians into streets, forcing the recruits to make split-second decisions. Shoot or hold, engage or risk an ambush. Sarah's chest tightened with every call. One wrong move and her people would pay. At the second sector, it happened. They pushed into a courtyard. A man burst from a doorway, rifle across his chest. Sarah's sights locked on him and froze. For a breath, she wasn't in Georgia. She was back in Kabul. The man's eyes weren't hostile. They were wide, frightened. And in his arms, she swore she saw a child. Her finger hesitated. The shot cracked from behind her. Maria, the cadre dropped, paint blossoming on his vest. Sarah flinched, breath ragged. Maria's voice snapped through the haze. "Focus, Morrison. He wasn't real. This is." Sarah blinked hard. The ghost slipped back into the shadows. She forced air into her lungs. "Clear the building," she ordered, louder than before. The squad surged forward. By the time they reached the final sector, the mock embassy, exhaustion weighed heavy. They had been moving for hours, sweat-soaking uniforms, lungs burning, but adrenaline pushed them forward. The embassy doors loomed, chained shut. Inside, voices screamed hostages or cadre playing them. Sarah scanned the windows, the rooftops. She knew the pattern. The final push was always the hardest, the ambush always the fiercest. "Stack up," she commanded. The recruits lined along the wall, rifles up, breaths sharp. Daniel's voice echoed in her memory. "This is where leaders are made." A shot cracked. A recruit at the rear went down, paint exploding across his chest. Then the rooftops lit up, cadre firing from every angle. Chaos erupted. Sarah's instincts screamed at her to freeze, to let someone else decide, to avoid the weight of another shot she couldn't take back. But she didn't. She rose from cover, voice cutting through the chaos. "Sullivan, suppress that rooftop. Garcia, breach team on me. Rest of you hold perimeter." She sprinted to the door, Maria and two others at her side. Together, they smashed the chains with a breaching tool, kicked the door open, stormed inside. The embassy interior was a maze of hallways and staircases, cadre shouting, paint rounds cracking. Sarah led from the front, clearing rooms, calling movements, dragging hostages to safety. Upstairs, the final cadre waited, rifle trained on a cowering civilian role player. For a moment the world froze. Sarah's scope found him. And once again Kabul, the boy, the child, the eyes. Her breath hitched, her finger trembled. Maria's voice cut through, sharp, urgent. "Take the shot, Morrison." Sarah's pulse thundered, the ghost loomed, the weight pressed. And then she chose. She squeezed. The paint round snapped across the room, striking the cadre square in the chest. He dropped, weapon clattering. The role player screamed, then froze, realizing she was safe. Sarah lowered her rifle, chest heaving. The ghost didn't vanish, but it didn't win. The final whistle blew. The exercise was over. The recruits stumbled out of the embassy, covered in sweat and paint, uniforms torn, eyes wide with the rush of survival. Daniel stood waiting, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Richardson appeared beside him, silent, watchful. The colonel finally spoke. "You secured all 3 sectors. You evacuated the hostages. You completed the mission." A pause, then, "Well done." Relief swept the squad. Some cheered, some collapsed into the dirt, some just grinned through exhaustion. Sarah stood apart, rifle in hand, eyes still on the embassy. Daniels approached her. His voice was low, private. "You hesitated again, but you moved. And that's the difference. Leaders aren't the ones who never falter. They're the ones who decide anyway." For once she met his eyes without fear. "I wasn't perfect, Sergeant." He gave a small nod. "No soldier ever is." The recruits gathered around her then, Maria clapping her on the shoulder, Jake grinning despite the welt on his cheek from a paint round. They looked at her not as the Olympian, not as the ghost of Kabul, but as their leader. And for the first time, Sarah let herself believe it. The past hadn't left her, it never would, but maybe that was the point. Maybe the weight wasn't a curse. Maybe it was what made her strong enough to carry others. The fire of the exercise still burned in her chest, but beneath it, something quieter flickered. Hope. Why did the silence feel heavier than the gunfire? Because for the first time in months there were no whistles, no orders, no rifles cracking overhead. Just a field of recruits standing in formation, boots polished, uniforms sharp, eyes forward as the band struck the opening notes of the graduation ceremony. The heat still pressed down, the Georgia sun relentless, but nobody noticed. This was the day they had carried in their minds through every mile, every blister, every sleepless night. And for Sarah, it was the day she had once thought she'd never reach. Colonel Richardson stepped to the podium, voice rolling across the parade ground with the gravity of a man who had seen too many beginnings and too many endings. "Today," he said, "you stop being recruits. Today you join the long line of those who have carried the weight of this uniform. You have been tested. You have been broken down and built again. And now you stand here not as individuals but as soldiers." His eyes moved over the formation, pausing only briefly when they landed on Sarah. Not with recognition of the Olympian, not with the weight of her secret, but with the respect of one soldier to another. In the rows beside her, Jake stood tall, his broad shoulders squared with quiet pride. Maria's chin was lifted, eyes sharp, her earlier distance replaced by something steadier, trust. Sergeant Daniels lurked at the edge of the parade ground, arms folded, face stone. He had said little since the final exercise, but his silence was no longer dismissive. It was reflective. Richardson continued, "You will go to different units, different missions, different battles. Some of you will never see each other again, but what you carry from here will remain. Discipline, brotherhood, the knowledge that you survived together." He let the words hang, then added softly, "and the understanding that every soldier has a story you cannot see." Sarah's chest tightened. She knew who those words were meant for. When the names were called, one by one, the recruits stepped forward to receive their certificates, their handshakes, their transformation from civilians to soldiers. When Private Sarah Morrison Cooper rang out, the formation shifted. A murmur rippled. Cameras clicked in the crowd of families who had gathered, whispers racing through the bleachers as the name reached familiar ears. She walked forward, steps measured, shoulders squared. The colonel shook her hand, his grip firm. "Well done, Private," he said quietly for her alone. "Carry it well." She nodded, "Yes, sir." When she returned to formation, Jake caught her eye, grinning like a brother who had watched her climb a mountain. Maria gave the faintest nod, subtle but full of respect. For the rest of the ceremony she stood still, but inside her chest something was shifting. Because it wasn't medals hanging from her neck. It wasn't a scoreboard or a podium or a crowd chanting her name. It was something quieter, stronger. When the formation was dismissed, chaos erupted, families rushing forward, laughter, embraces. Some recruits wept openly in their parents' arms. Others laughed, clapped each other on the back, shouted promises to keep in touch. Sarah stood apart for a moment, watching it all. Her parents weren't there. She hadn't invited them. They would never understand why she traded gold for fatigue. But she didn't feel alone. Jake approached first, dragging her into a one-armed hug that nearly lifted her off her feet. "We made it, Morrison." She smiled, breathless. "We did." Maria followed, arms crossed, smirking. "Guess I was wrong about you." Sarah tilted her head. "Which part?" Maria shrugged. "All of it." She extended her hand. Sarah took it, the handshake firm, unspoken words passing between them. When they broke apart, Daniel stood there. No smirk, no bark, just a man stripped bare of the armor he wore for 20 years. "You led them well," he said simply. "Thank you, Sergeant." He hesitated. Then, almost reluctantly, "You made me rethink some things." She met his eyes. "You made me tougher, I needed that." The silence between them was heavy but not hostile. Respect forged in fire. That evening, after the crowds had gone and the barracks were quiet, Sarah sat alone on the steps, watching the last light fade across the horizon. The air smelled of cut grass and gun oil, of endings and beginnings. She thought of Kabul, of the rooftop, of the boy's eyes. The guilt was still there, it would always be there, but it no longer crushed her chest. It lived beside her now, not as a chain but as a reminder. Richardson's words echoed in her mind. Choose, every day, what you'll do with the weight. She breathed in deep, the night air cool against her skin. Behind her, voices rose in laughter, Jake telling some exaggerated story, Maria arguing with him, others chiming in. A new family, rough-edged, imperfect, but hers. Sarah stood, looking back once more at the barracks where she had been broken down, remade and reborn. She touched the compression wrap on her wrist, the Olympic rings hidden beneath. They would always be a part of her, but now they weren't the whole of her. She whispered into the fading light, not to anyone around her, but to herself. I was Sarah Morrison, the girl who never missed. Now I'm Sarah Cooper, a soldier who doesn't need to be perfect. The words hung in the twilight, soft but steady. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.